but we did have the tornado watch today. Um, Keith Hernandez will join us in a little while. We'll take it till 6:30. We'll be joined by the fan at 6, as is always the case. Remember, we got draft shows coming up 6 to 7 Thursday and Friday before the draft shows on the fan. We'll have our own draft preview on the fans Thursday night, Friday night. We got some new stuff on the draft. Basically, a lot of people are starting to really throw a lot of stuff in front of Tua. Teams have him off the board, other injuries. You've heard all this stuff. So the question is, how much damage can they do to this very talented kid who clearly is injury prone? I cannot tell you he's not. He is. I mean, you don't need anybody to tell you he's injury prone. He's had a multiple number of injuries. Even if there's been extra injuries, has been rumored. The bottom line is we've had plenty of visible injuries that have kept him out of games. We know what they are. Okay? He's had major injuries. We know that. We also know he's incredibly talented. The question is he off boards? Is he on boards? Will he sink like a stone? Will he be taken? Will somebody get a very talented player later in the first round? You know, a big sink for him would be if he fell to 12, would be enormous. That would be enormous. I don't think he ever gets to that far. I think by the time they got to 7, 8, teams would be doing handstands to get him. So let's see how it unfolds. The word today that Gronkowski is probably headed to Tampa. So good for him. You know what? It makes Tampa more attractive. It helps put Tampa on the screen. It makes it, the NFL now has another very attractive team to sell. Hey, they have Brady and they have Gronk and they have Evans and Godwin and Howard and Jones, and hey, they loaded offensively, and they have Tom Brady. So I mean, hey, with a very aggressive play calling head coach. So it's a fun team, and it'll be a very marketable team for the league. It's a good thing for the league, no question about it. Before I break and get to Keith and do some baseball with Keith Hernandez in a couple minutes, I'm going to be pessimistic here for a minute, and I hate being pessimistic. I, like everybody else, know that with each passing day, the economy is getting deeper and deeper into a hole that which it's going to take a long time to come out of. I'll be the first to admit that. So I understand anybody who is upset that his business is closed, is worried about a business he built, is worried about a job he loved, or any and all of the above. I also understand people who are frustrated with our nation's reaction to this because I don't think we did a very good job. We dropped the ball. If there was going to be a testing program that worked, it would have had to start 4 or 5 weeks ago. Now we're way behind the curve. Plus, if you listen to the testing experts, doctors who are there, they're telling you a very different story. What they're telling you is that the big problem is that the agents you need, both the materials you need and the liquid agents you need to create these tests, is not available because there's been such world demand for the testing agents, which has never happened before, that they take a while to be replenished. They need, instead of a small basin, they need a reservoir full. They don't have them, so the tests are not available. So everyone's telling everybody the tests are available, they're not. Plus, you have the White House or the federal government, which is punting on testing because they got so far behind and screwed up testing. Now they don't want to be a part of it because they know it's a loss for them anyway they touch it. So they don't want to touch it. They want to punt it on the states. From their standpoint, for a re-election move, it's probably not a bad move. Wash your hands and hope for the best. Because they don't have a testing program ready to go anyway. Nobody does. The problem is everyone's telling you now testing is the answer, which I understand. Every doctor's telling you that. Everyone in theory that works, but we don't have the testing materials. We don't have the tests. We don't have a way to test everybody. It's not something that, and states are not equipped to do it. They don't have the money, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the resources, and they don't have the equipment. So how are we going to do this? Don't know. It does not look promising. We need to know that there's a lot of people. Well, the break would be that if we find out that there's a lot more people who have had the virus who are over it. If it turns out that like 5% of the country has been infected so far and the rest is vulnerable, we are screwed. Because a lot of people are going to get it. And a lot of people are going to get really sick. And let's be honest. And I hate this part because it's really pessimistic. And it has to do with all the stuff that I really like. Sports, all the major sports, horse racing, even entertainment, concerts, plays, all that kind of stuff. Even going to movies. All that stuff is going to really be slowed. And we need a miracle. We need a therapeutic. We eventually need a vaccine, but that's going to take a while. We know that. We're working towards that. They're giving people economic incentive to be there. They have people working around the clock on it. They have people working on it everywhere. They have great manpower on it. They are working on it very, very hard. I don't think anybody disputes that. Any way you slice it, it's going to take a while. Now, a therapeutic, maybe we already have one. Hopefully we do. Hopefully we're moving towards one quickly. And then we got to replenish it. We got to get the government to basically tell the company, hey, I don't care what you have to do. You get these 4 of your competitors in the business of making the same agent. This is a national mandate. That's all there is to it. If it turns out that they have to produce a tremendous amount of this drug. Because right now you can't get the remdesivir. You can't get it. I mean, if you want it, and it's applied intravenously, I think you got to take it for 6 days in a row. The bottom line is, they can say, all right, we're pulling the bans. Remember, they can tell you to go home, which they did. They can't tell you to go back to work. That's up to your employer, and that's up to you. So the idea that you just all of a sudden say, hey, we're back, it doesn't work that way. Anybody who sells you that that's going to happen is full of baloney. Think about it for a second. I can tell you right now. They open up early. They say May 1st, we're lifting the restrictions in New York. Am I doing anything differently? Absolutely not. I'm going to the golf course. I'm doing a show from home. I'm not going out to a restaurant. I'm not going to any ball games. I'm not going to a movie. I'm not going to a play. I'm not going to a concert until there's a drug that works. Same thing for my wife. Same thing for virtually anybody I've asked. I asked doctors that I know who are seeing patients by Zoom, are you going to see your patients that way for the foreseeable future? Do I think any of my kids are going back to school, physically going back to school this year? Nope. Do I know if they're going to have camps or something? That I don't know yet. I'd say it's 50-50. I think some camps have already taken the money. That's the only reason they might want to push as hard as they can to get the camps open, because they probably spent some of the money over the winter. You are not going to get the businesses or the actions that need contact, whether it's hopping on the LIRR at rush hour, whether it's hopping in the subway to take the 4 train or the 7 train or whatever train. Don't ask me about trains because I don't take the subway. The subway, one doctor told me, is like a petri dish. Going into a crowded movie theater to see a hot movie that's coming out. Going into a Broadway theater where you know they jam you into those seats that are the tightest seats you ever get is at a Broadway play, because you go to a good Broadway house, one of the big ones, and they sandwich those seats in so tight, it is unbelievable. There's no leg room. There's no room anywhere in those seats. It's the only place I ever asked to sit on the end because the seats are so cramped, it's ridiculous. But you don't mind it when it's a good play or a musical. I like Broadway. I've always liked Broadway. I particularly like musicals, right? I don't see that many good dramas in my life. You know, I probably haven't seen enough of them, but I prefer to go to a good. You go see something like Jersey Boys or uh, um, Beautiful, the Carole King, which was tremendous, or even Mamma Mia, which was really good. I mean, you go down the line and go back to the old days, from watching The King and I to 42nd Street to Chorus Line to, just all the classics. And people will miss that. That's a great luxury. It's a great, something that really is a special night when you go to Broadway. Or going to a ball game. Are you going to go to a ball game on a Tuesday night in July? 40,000 people. You think you're going to put 40,000 people there? I'm not going. Not until I know that if I get this virus, that I'm not getting sicker than I would if I got the flu. Until I know that. And I don't know that yet. And my doctors are telling me that that's not the case right now. So they're telling me it's not. And they're saying, you don't want to get this. That's what they've told me. You don't want to get this. And you don't want anybody you know who has a compromised immune system or any previous illnesses, you don't want them to get this. And I said to a doctor who is a smart doctor, I said to him today, I said, what if we throw it open? He said, we're going to have a lot of people sick. I said, are we going to have a lot of people die? He says, it depends on the therapeutic. He says, it also depends on how many people actually get it, which is a hard number to calculate. He said, but you're going to get a lot of illness out of this, serious lung illness. People are going to recover, but they're going to be seriously impaired for good. We're seeing that already. So you're seeing a residue of serious lung injuries and illness because this affects the lining, the packaging of the lining on, listen, I'm not a doctor, to the lungs. Okay, that's my understanding, which is why oxygen, you want to get an oxygen, an oxometer, I think it's called, an oxometer. If you want to be, if you're a hypochondriac, you're someone who really worries about this stuff, get an oxometer, the thing that you can put on your finger and see what your oxygen is. That's how you can tell if you're sick. You get one of those. Right now they're sold out. But if you get one and keep it home, you can tell when it gets down to, that starts hitting the 70s or something. When you go in the hospital, they put that thing on your finger and it beeps and it's, it has your oxygen. You can get one of those for your house. And this affects your oxygen level. So when you have this, your oxygen level goes down. That's why people wind up in the hospital because they can't breathe because the oxygen level is going down. Here's what I'm really depressed about. And I never get depressed. I'm a positive person. I really am. I look for the best in everything. I look for the way out of something. I think I'm a good problem solver. I don't see a plan that works. I even think the testing thing they're telling us is a bunch of baloney. I don't think they believe in it yet because I haven't seen any plan that I tried to follow the plan. It don't make any sense to me. Tracing makes no sense to me. You're going to tell me that one person's going to get sick and you're going to actually employ people to follow the people they met or talk to? No one has the manpower to do that. In a country our size, nobody has the ability to do that. How many people are you talking about? Having thousands of people employed in every city? I mean, come on, we don't have any manpower like that. So to me, this thing doesn't really stop impacting us until we have a therapeutic that tells you if I go to the hospital and I can't breathe, I can take this and I'm going to go home. I'm going to walk out of that hospital. When I get to that point, then this is just a flu. Might be a bad flu, but it's just a flu. It's not a killer. And, of course, when we get to a vaccine that we can take and no longer exists, well, that's obviously a different story. But we know that's at least a year away. The question is, can we get a therapeutic? If we don't get a therapeutic, I don't know how we're going to have sports in this country this year. Not with fans at the games. I don't see how it works. I don't see how college football works. I don't know how my kids go back to school next fall. I don't know how anybody goes to a ball game. I don't see anybody flocking to restaurants. I don't see anybody at plays or concerts. I don't see anybody on planes. I don't see anybody on boats. I don't see anybody in hotel rooms. I think we see an enormous amount of our economy stalled until we have a therapeutic that we believe in. So we better get cranking on that, because that's what's going to change things. Otherwise, it's going to look a lot like it looks now for a long time. And that's after you're allowed to go back. So you can't be picking in the street. You know what? We're open for business. Everybody's open for business, but there's not a whole lot of business going on. Because anybody who can stay home will. Anybody who can do business from home will. Anybody who can keep his distance will. And anything that is in any way optional, in any way is the entertainment dollar or the recreation dollar, or is something that doesn't do with your essential living, where it's a choice to go to it, a sporting event, a movie, a concert, a restaurant, all that will get absolutely destroyed until we as a nation and as a people believe we have a remedy that works. So it was sports after 9/11, 10 days later, that brought us back. It started with that night when Piazza hit the home run off Carsey. That started to bring us back. The Yankees and the Diamondbacks playing that World Series brought us back. Going to those football games and waving the flag and cheering the first responders brought us back. It unified us and it brought us back. Sports will not do that this time because no one's going to be there. And we're not even sure the players want any part of it yet either. So they can keep screaming. But you know what? Everything I hear is they talk the testing word, but nobody has a real testing plan, which is why the federal government's running away from it, because they don't have a plan. They better get to the therapeutic plan, because that one looks like the only one that could change things. That looks like the only game changer. And I don't think anybody has the nerve to just throw this thing open because they're afraid of what might happen. And God forbid this thing mutates into a more serious virus, which is always an option. Doesn't mean it happens. More times than not, it doesn't, but it is always an option. Keith and Anna's when we come back. This evening, I see the president's in his regular spot today. Let's see what today's headline is, that they're updating everybody on the federal response to the virus. I think the powers that be came to an agreement on extending the money. They came up with the money they wanted. They added on a couple of different things. I haven't seen the bells and whistles yet. One thing that has happened here is, both in terms of Congress, with Mnuchin, who I think has done a very good job, okay? I think he has been very, very solid through this whole thing. I think Mnuchin has done I think he's a smart man, very capable man. I understand he lives high on the hog, okay? So what? He's earned that in his life. I understand he likes the better things in life, okay? That's fine too. But I think he's been very capable. I think he's worked very hard here. I think Mnuchin has done a very, very good job. I think he's been a very good public servant. I think he doesn't have to do this. He's a very wealthy man. He's done very well for himself. I think he's been an important cog in this thing. And I understand that there are those who will say, hey, what are we doing as far as turning the machine on and printing money? But both Congress and the Fed have thrown an incomparable, and there's no other word for it, historic, incomparable, utterly overwhelming amount of money at the issue. So it's funny. They asked the Berkshire Hathaway dynamic duo, two of the brightest businessmen in the history of the world, okay, Buffett and Munger. Okay, now Buffett is very nuanced. Munger, who's a little older, and they're both old, but Munger will speak his mind. And they asked, hey, why aren't you guys buying anything? And he said, nobody needs money this time. And that shows you the difference between '08 and '09 when the companies were completely illiquid and we were within a couple of hours of having basically the economy stop because we had no liquidity. If you cannot borrow money, there is no such thing as an economy. It doesn't work. The economy is based on the ability to borrow money. There has to be a system where you can borrow money. If there's not a system for credit and the system for people to borrow money, there's no such thing as an economy. Now, this time, you can go back 2 weeks on Wednesday. I remember the morning where I played in the market every day. The futures were way down. They were down like 700-800 points. We were looking at the first real bad numbers we were going to get on unemployment. And the market was going to open awful. It's like 8:30. We're waiting on the unemployment numbers. And the Fed comes up with an announcement at that time that they are showing up and they're going to backstop everything. And not just buy a few things. They're buying everything. They are backstopping everything. And they put up $2.3 trillion, supposedly even more than that. And you realize that when you take what Congress has thrown in there and what the Fed has promised, between the two of them, they have thrown over $5 trillion at this problem. Now, when you realize that in a quarter of the year, the economy would be about 5.5 trillion. It's about 22 trillion for the 12 months. So about 5.5 trillion. They threw 5.5 trillion in there in like 3 weeks. So there has been no liquidity problem because the money's there, which is why Wall Street, for the most part, it took an early hit, and then it came right back. Came right back despite the talk of it going down 40% and 45% because there was liquidity. The bond market looked like it was going to be trouble. No trouble because the Fed showed up. Fed showed up. There was talk that the commercial real estate market was going to have a big problem. They took care of that. So the bottom line is they came in and said, we're backing everything. We're buying everything. And all of a sudden, there was money for everything. So I understand. We no longer have guys in Washington saying, hey, we can't print money. This has got to stop. Yes, eventually we're going to pay the piper here. Now, maybe I'm not going to pay the piper. Maybe my kids are going to pay the piper. Maybe they can push this along that far. I don't know. There are people who will know that better than I do. But sooner or later, you do the math, there's going to come a point where somebody is going to have some inflation issues when you have all this money produced. Sooner or later, somebody's got to pay the piper. Now, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. That was not going to be the case. You were not going to have that market go down 5,000 points. It was not going to happen in an election year. So, and the money is there for unemployment. Now, you might have a state have a problem. You might have somebody not get the money yet. You might have a little trick with one of the banks. That's all fine. For the most part, people are getting the money. And there has not been any illiquidity anywhere, which is why you have not had any crises yet in the money markets, which has meant that this has been kind of peaceful in that regard. And we can act like nobody pays attention to the stock market. And most people aren't in the stock market. Maybe 25% of the people pay attention to the stock market. But everyone knows when the market's doing well or doing badly. They know what's going on because they see it on the news. They see it in the newspapers. If it has a bad day, it's there. Everyone knows what's going on there, good or bad, and what the unemployment numbers are. And so far, while the unemployment numbers have been enormous, nobody has talked about the real central issues of how bad this economy really is. It's bad. We're going to get to that one of these days. We haven't gotten there yet. And that's because of the Fed and because of what Mnuchin has done. Powell and Mnuchin, with the urging of the powers that be, Powell and Mnuchin have done the job there. They have kept everything very, very liquid. So there's been no issues there. And that has averted those crises. Now, again, there's more problems, and a bunch of them straight ahead. The bigger problem is you wish Mnuchin could turn his attentions to getting a plan to get things reopened because, you know what, they don't seem to have one. They could use his brain power in that regard because they blew testing early, and now they're way behind the 8 ball, and now nobody has a plan. So that one's a little trickier. And I think it might be up to the old drug companies to come up with a therapeutic that works. Because other than that, I think we could be slow. We could be slow seeing sports. We could be slow seeing entertainment. We could be slow seeing concerts. We could be slow seeing really a lot of our nation come back. So the point is, what happens when they throw it open and nobody moves? And you're like, whoa, nobody moved. Subway's still empty. Trains are still empty. Now, wouldn't be empty, but might not be overflowing. It's not going to come back all at once. When we come back, we'll be on the fan.
Mike's on. He's ready to go. On the fan. New York Sports Radio. Mike's on. Mike's on. He'll get you the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM. WFAN.
All right, a little after 6 o'clock, Susan and John will have Yankee game for you coming up at 6:30 this evening. Brought to you, as always, by Casamigos Tequila. Brought to you by those who drink it on this 21st day of the month of April. We're a couple of days away from the NFL draft. We'll have draft shows for you. We'll have an hour show for you at 6 to 7 on Thursday and Friday. They'll have draft shows on the fan following us both nights. I'll have Scott Pioli with me both days. I'll also have some reporters checking in on both hours, so we'll have some preview stuff for you both days, and a guy who was one of the top executives in the league for years, so he'll join us for both days. We have that locked up, so he'll give you some thoughts. Now, you know, I probably have spent on this show more time than most people have on their shows talking about Tua because he's been a favorite of mine going back a long time. I have always spoken about him in raves as far as his physical ability. I don't think anybody disputes how good he is. I mean, look at the numbers and what he accomplished at Alabama. There's no question he is an injury risk. I don't think anybody doubts that. Now, what happens is you get this game before the draft. Everybody plays it. They play it to the positive. They play it to the negative. You've seen the reports coming out in the last 24 hours to 48 hours that he is off multiple teams' boards. Would that be a shocker? Would it be a shocker that a guy who is coming off a major hip injury has had major high ankle sprains that required surgery? One required surgery. I think they both did, but I could be wrong about both of them having surgery. I think they both had a procedure. I don't know if they would both be considered surgeries. I think this year was surgery. I don't know if last year was surgery. He had a broken finger. There is some disputing whether he actually fractured his wrist. That has been brought up in a couple of places. I don't know if that's accurate or not. We haven't seen that confirmed yet. He has been given medical clearance by, obviously, the people close to him, by the people who are talking for him at Alabama. Obviously, his agent is going to say all that and more. And you know that there's going to be people who want him to slide in the draft. There's going to be guys who want their quarterback to go ahead of him, that means a lot of money. Every time you pass a team, it costs you money in this thing. That's the way it works. There's a slotting process that goes on here. Every time you get past a certain spot, it costs you money. And now, quarterbacks are tricky. They aren't judged the same way, and they don't fall in the draft the same way. There are times when a player can be red flagged, like a Warren Sapp, and he'll fall like a stone. Thurman Thomas did. And if you notice, both those guys, it turned out, if somebody had selected them far earlier, they would have been very smart to do so. They both had wonderful careers. There's the guys I'm sure that we could come up with who slid who didn't have great careers. I'm sure we can come up with more than a couple. But quarterbacks are tricky because unlike every other position, they are always in the eye of the beholder. So is there a team there that I'm sure has decided it's too risky to take to it? Yeah, I'm sure there is. Well, I would not have any problem with a team that came to that conclusion, especially in this year when you're not having the hands-on that you'd like to have with players. A lot of his stuff has been compared. You know, there were people who had Drew Brees off the board. And there were people who had Drew Brees as a guy who was going to be physically unable to play in this league. And we know that teams made judgments on that, and it cost them dearly. Well, guys who stayed away from him for a variety of reasons, including injuries, and it wound up costing them dearly. Will that be the case with Tua? We'll wait and see. That's what makes it interesting. There's no question. Here's a guy in the premier program in America has been incredibly productive. I mean, you're looking at his numbers. I mean, the guy came off the bench having never played and turned his team around and won a national championship game from out of nowhere. And then in his 2 years that he played, basically put up like 70 touchdowns and like 5 interceptions. And he won. And he put up incredible numbers. And in most of those games, he didn't even have to play the fourth quarter. He didn't have to keep chucking. He could have thrown another 30, 40 touchdown passes. In his games, he didn't have to do it anymore. You could say, oh, well, he's at Alabama. Yeah, but that also meant that he never had to go out there and throw 6 or 7 touchdown passes, which he never did. He could have done that on a variety of occasions, but he didn't have to do that because his team wasn't giving up those kind of points. So he never had to go out there. He'd stop at 3 or 4 and be done for the day, but he didn't have to go out there and throw 7 or 8, which he could have done very easily. So those stats could have been way more overwhelming than they even are. Then you had this league. I mean, it's almost been pile on 2 a week. This week you had the Wonderlic, where they first said he got a 13, where it turned out to be erroneous. Then he got a 19, which isn't anything to write home about. Well, like I told you, there's been guys, I can tell you, that are in the Hall of Fame that have had Wonderlicks that are really rotten. Lower than that and are in the Hall of Fame. So is it the end-all, be-all? It's not. Would you rather be higher? Hell, heck, what test would you want someone to take that you wouldn't want it to be higher? So now the Wonderlic. Now he's off boards. Now he's got injuries they're hiding. And he's got this. And he's got that. So does that allow teams that maybe didn't think they had a chance to get this guy now dream that they're going to walk out of here and then get in front of you on Thursday and say, I cannot believe that I got a guy that I thought was the best player in the country by 10 miles, and I got him with the X pick. So you might hear somebody with a big smile on their face get up and tell you that on Thursday night. And whoever takes him, that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you he was the best player in the country, which was not a stretch. He wasn't this year. Burrow was, but was he for the couple of years he played? Yeah, he was. And he's on the best team. So it creates a fascinating situation. And then you have the attraction tonight of Gronkowski, and people are saying, oh, well, what has he got left? Well, we'll find out. Listen, it's a no-brainer. It just makes the team more attractive. If you're Tampa, you do it. If you're New England, you do it because, you know what? You weren't going to get anything for him anyway. He wasn't going to play for you. So if you're going to get a pick for it, take it. And if you're Tampa, you got nothing to lose. He's going to make your team more attractive. He's going to put more pizzazz into things. And Who knows? Maybe he and Tom have a little magic left. They've sure had plenty of magic in their lives. They've made plenty of beautiful music together on the field. That we know. So if they have a couple more songs to play between the two of them, a couple more duets to play or to sing, God bless them. The fact that Gronkowski comes back makes the league a little more attractive. The fact that he comes back and plays with Tom in Tampa makes it even more attractive than that. That's a good thing for everybody. And obviously, between now and Thursday night, there's going to be a whole lot more going on about a quarterback who there's been a whole lot of talk about for a couple of years now. He's been the talk of the sport since the second half of that championship game. He'll be the talk of the sport for at least a couple more days. Back after this. I'm a presidential historian. I don't get how he's comparing the Cuban Missile Crisis to this. Now, I was a little boy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? But it was over before it started. I mean, I remember they had us doing, in those days, just to show you how ridiculous it was, they would teach you in Catholic school how to basically hide under your desk. Now, if somebody dropped a nuclear weapon on us, what good was it going to do to hide under a desk that didn't even have enclosure to it? It was basically open on three sides. It had a place where you stuck the books in. It was open and had some wrought iron in the middle, and then, it was on legs. Going under that desk, how is that going to stop a weapon? Now, if you've seen 13 Days, which I'm sure you've seen, the movie, and it's a somewhat fabricated look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, because it's through the eyes of one of JFK's aides, who really wasn't part of the government. He really was JFK didn't have a chief of staff. So he had a doorkeeper. He had someone who kind of who said no and set up his schedule, and he had two guys who were his buddies. And JFK liked to do things where he had a lot of people do a lot of different things. He liked to be the center of this, or as he liked to say, he was kind of the center of the wheel. But he liked to hear from a whole bunch of different people. Well, the Cuban Missile Crisis is, if you watch that movie with Kevin Costner playing the Kenny O'Donnell role, he is basically, along with Powers, the two guys from Boston who were part of the JFK team, who go back with him from the days where he started in politics as a congressman, then a senator, and then obviously running for president and winning the presidency. That was his role. War hero, run for Congress, win, not knowing anything about politics, run for senator, be the popular senator, be a senator for 8 years, and then run for president and win in 60. But they made him have the way it was with Costner's project and Costner's the star, they made him a very big part of it, a bigger part of it than he really was. So that was the look at it. But that was a tense 2 weeks of which the country wasn't even aware of the first 7 or 8 days of it. They kept it quiet. They kept until he met the nation and had decided on blockade and met the nation and told them, here's what we're doing. And then we waited for the confrontation on the high seas. No one knew what was going on. So they kind of hid that as they kind of fought it out behind the scenes, because you got to remember, when JFK jumped into the presidency, he got talked into a Cuba action that didn't go well, known as the Bay of Pigs. And he then didn't trust his advisors after that, his military advisors, because they let him down they told him they were ready and they weren't ready. They told him a lot of things were ready that weren't ready. They even got the time wrong. They actually had the time wrong, the time zones wrong, so the air cover missed by an hour, just to give you an idea. So it was a mess. So he was a little leery of those guys after that. So there was a tenseness there. But my point is, the country knew about that for a couple of days, and then it was over. They got exposed. They met, went before the UN, exposed them. Russia backed down. Away we go. Okay. Yes, we were at the brink of maybe, and I was in second grade, so I didn't realize how scary it was. I do remember my parents, my mother, and my father was gone already, but I do remember my mother being worried, and the TVs being on, and everyone watching what was unfolding. I do remember that. I don't remember it being anywhere near as ominous as what came right after that, which was when Kennedy was assassinated. That was a very weird 4 days for the country, and all the way to that whole Christmas. You know, people weren't putting up Christmas lights, and everyone was very sad about the whole thing. And you know that I remember is it unfolded over a whole weekend from Friday afternoon right through that Monday, and what went on and everything. That had a far greater impact than the missile crisis did. 9/11 was 10 days, and then we came back. That Piazza game was 10 days, was 9/21. That was 10 days later. And then we were unified. We were incredibly unified. Right now, we're not unified in any way. We continue to fight like crazy. We continue to either be blindly behind the president or blindly attacking the president. There's no middle ground. Very little middle ground. And obviously, it's an election year. Everyone knows that. And we don't have any game plan here. We're dealing with an invisible enemy. No one has a book for this. And there's an incredible amount of anxiety and an incredible amount of uncertainty. And we're asked to be inactive. We're asked to just sit back and not act. We're told not to act, to step back and let this happen. So it's a very different place right now. And what really makes it very tough is a month into this, we don't have a lot of answers. When you look every night for answers, we don't have any. They don't have any. They don't say, here's the plan, here's the date, here's what we're going to do, and then we'll be done with it. Well, it doesn't work that way. We might have this, we might do this, we might do that. Then the state if you watch the states, then you watch the governor, they'll tell you something completely different. They're not on the same page. If you see three doctors, they'll give you three different interpretations of the same thing. And nobody has any answers. They tell you we might have to wait a year for a remedy. We don't know if the virus will get worse. We don't know if it will come back. We don't even know if you get it once, if you can get it again. We don't even know that yet. So what we have are a ton of questions and no answers. And that's what makes this so hard to deal with. 9/11, we came back. We were knocked for a loop. We were hurt. We were angry. We were stunned. Then we rallied. Then we got behind each other and got behind our leaders. And then we came together as a country. And sports helped rally us in a big way. It's not there this time. It can't be there this time. There's no rallying point this time. There's no gathering this time. So we're waiting for somebody in a lab somewhere to wave a magic wand and come up with a way to make this whole thing disappear. So we're looking for some guy in a long coat to come up with an answer. Some guy who has spent his years in research and spent his years fighting these viruses and dealing with antibodies and dealing with all this different stuff. We're hoping that that person can come up with an answer for all of us. Because if he doesn't, or she doesn't, I don't know where the answer's coming from right now. It's a completely different thing. So when we look at even what happened in World War II or what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis or what happened on 9/11, they're all so different than this. This is about inaction. This is about stepping back. And this is about anxiety and uncertainty and no answers. This is so much harder and so much more frustrating and so much more divisive just by its very nature. That's why any little bit we can do to unify any part of this or to get behind any part of it is really, really productive. You got Susan and John coming up. They got another Yankee win. Remember, one thing about these games, you'll go away smiling. No losses. These teams and these games, they're undefeated. They don't lose. That's one thing you know about. You're going home happy. You know that going in. You're going home happy. So tonight they got another game for you. That's coming up. Remember, we'll have draft shows on Thursday night, 6 to 7. Friday night, 6 to 7. We will see you tomorrow. 5o'clockradio.com, 6 o'clock on the fan as we approach 6:30. Brought to you, as always, by the good folks at Casamigos Tequila. Brought to you by those who drink it. Big game coming up, so enjoy tonight's broadcast with Susan and John. We'll see you tomorrow. Be safe.